Now, many things have been said about Mystery Babylon in my 3 previous sermons. And you would have realized that Mystery Babylon is a complicated, complex, and mysterious subject. Its conspiratorial nature cannot be missed. I tried my best to distill the essence of the subject matter and present to it as simply as possible. It is not easy, like what I say is complex, but I try to put it forward to you in a simple way. Now, I cover the topic pretty comprehensively. I also did a fair bit of connecting the dots from the Bible to the real world. I connected biblical prophecies to the current events and developments. Fascinatingly, you see the words in the scripture coming alive. And that's because we are living at the end of this present age where we are seeing many of these biblical eschatological prophecies coming to pass right before our eyes. It is somewhat scary, but it is fascinating. I didn't shy away from certain controversial stuff because they are true. Because they are true. They are controversial only because they are not generally known and understood. They are hidden, and sometimes they are hidden in plain sight. Revelation chapter 17 and 18 focus exclusively on Mystery Babylon. In chapter 17, the spotlight is focused primarily on political Babylon, and with a political and religious Babylon. And then in chapter 18, the spotlight turned towards commercial or economic Babylon. Now, most Christians think that spiritual warfare between God and the devil is fought in the lives of individual men and women like you and I. But nothing is further from the truth. The reality is quite different. The cosmic battle is also fought in the arenas of politics, religion, and commerce or economics. These are the 3 spheres in which Mystery Babylon operates. Now let us now look at today's text in Revelation chapter 18. But I will start reading from the first 2 verses of Revelation chapter 17 in order to give us the context. After going through 3 sermons, sometimes you get lost as to what we are really talking about. So I'm going to give you the context by reading, first of all, Revelation chapter 17, verses 1 and 2. And you realize it is all about the judgment of Mystery Babylon. So Revelation chapter 17, verses 1 and 2. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute, who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." Now, in the last few verses of chapter 17, we read that the Antichrist and his one-world government turned against Mystery Babylon and destroy it. Now, this is a divine judgment. It is God who will instigate the Antichrist to destroy Mystery Babylon. After this, the Apostle John saw another vision, a new vision, a fresh vision, which is recorded in Revelation chapter 18. It is a long chapter, okay? Longer than chapter 17, but we're going to read the entire chapter so that we get a good sense of what is contained in this vision of the Apostle John. So let's read Revelation chapter 18, verse 1 all the way to verse 24. After this, I, John, saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a horn for every unclean spirit, and a horn for every unclean bird, a horn for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of a luxurious living. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she makes. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a light measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason, her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and live in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear for her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses and chariots, and slaves, that is, human soul. The fruit for which your soul long has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gathered wealth from her will stand far off in fear of a torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour, all this wealth will be laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying aloud, Alas, alas, for the great city where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon the Great be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And the craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on earth. Now, people who have studied Revelation chapter 17 and 18 seriously often wonder why there are two destructions of mystery Babylon. At the end of chapter 17, we are told that the Antichrist and the one world government will utterly destroy Babylon the Great. And then we are also told, that this is God's doing. God will use the Antichrist to destroy mystery Babylon. Then in chapter 18, which is another vision, a fresh vision, a separate vision, John saw God destroy Mystery Babylon. So in the first vision in chapter 17, it was the Antichrist that destroyed Mystery Babylon. And in chapter 18, it was God himself personally destroying Mystery Babylon. So the question is, why are there two destructions? Or are these two separate accounts referring to the one and same event, one and the same destruction? Okay, there are different views to that. My view is this: I believe that there are two different destructions. The destruction mentioned at the end of chapter 17 and the destruction mentioned in the entire chapter of Revelation chapter 18 are two separate and different destructions. The Antichrist will destroy political Babylon to consolidate his control and power over the nations and the people of the world. But he will leave commercial or economic Babylon untouched. Why should he destroy economic Babylon? It is bringing him and his last and the final world empire, prestige, power, and great wealth. So why would he want to destroy that? He won't. But finally, God will personally destroy economic Babylon. And just that you know, Babylon the Great described in Revelation chapter 17 and 18 is, in my opinion, in my primary scenario, is the United States of America. I've said that a couple of times. You can have a different position from me. It is okay. But my strong opinion and primary scenario is that Babylon the Great, okay, described at the end of chapter 17 and in the entire chapter of Revelation 18 refers to the United States of America. And if you're interested to know the reason, I'm not going to repeat them in this sermon. Go to my two previous sermons where I talk about why I believe the United States is Babylon the Great in this present time. So Revelation chapter 18 is focused on commercial Babylon. It is quite clear, even from a cursory reading of the chapter. You don't really have to go and dissect it, cut it apart, and say, oh, this is about commercial Babylon. It is quite clear. In chapter 17, Mystery Babylon's dealing are with the kings and the masses of people. In chapter 18, her dealings are primarily with the merchants. In chapter 18, her dealings are primarily with the merchants. The word merchants is mentioned 4 times in chapter 18. And it is also obvious that trade and economy, global trade and economy, is the focus in chapter 18. There are repeated references to trade, wealth, shipmaster, merchants, cargo ships, and goods. And John gives us a detailed description of the different categories of goods. They range from basic necessities and commodities such as wheat, flour, oil, cattle, and sheep, to spices like cinnamon, myrrh, and frankincense, to luxury items like wine, jewel, pearls, fine linen, silk, and expensive cloth. And also mentioned are construction materials such as wood, bronze, iron, marble, and precious metals like gold and silver. And then there is the category of military equipment and hardware. And you read about horses and chariots. Of course, nowadays the armies of the world don't fight with horses and chariots, but these are merely reference to modern day tanks, fighter jets, submarines, warships, rockets, and missiles. Now, at the end of the list, there is the unsavory category of slaves and human souls. Now, many people don't realize that human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar business. It is a flourishing trade. Human trafficking is an industry by itself. Every day, thousands of women, children, and man as well, are trafficked worldwide for exploitative purposes. Forbes magazine estimated in 2020 that human traffickers earn $150 billion annually. Okay, billions, not millions. And there are other estimates that are very much higher. Human trafficking is a very lucrative business. Okay? So, we are talking about world trade in Revelation chapter 18. Babylon the Great is a center of global trade and commerce. Babylon the Great is the greatest consumer nation on the surface of the earth. And that's why kings, merchants, and people, shipmasters as well, will weep and lament when it is destroyed. Babylon is their means of wealth. Babylon is their means of acquiring wealth and getting really rich. So you can see why I repeatedly say that the United States of America is Babylon the Great. The United States is by far the greatest, the biggest economy and the biggest consumer market in the whole world in this present time. And no other country comes close. If you believe that Jesus is coming back soon, that means perhaps in the next few years or in the next few decades, then it is impossible to see how another country or another city fit into this scenario described in Revelation chapter 18. It is impossible. Ancient Babylon and the Neo-Babylonian Empire of Nebuchadnezzar were thriving commercial centers with flourishing trade. They also had sophisticated monetary and banking system. You cannot have one without the other. And so, it is the United States of America. It is a huge commercial center, and at the same time, it is a banking and financial center, the largest in the entire world. And by the way, you have no choice but to interpret Babylon in Revelation chapter 18 as a literal city. As a literal city. I know that there are people who insist that you must interpret it metaphorically. All the destructions that goes on in Babylon using economic terms, using monetary terms, they want to look at it figuratively or metaphorically. It is impossible to do that. Okay, if you're honest with yourself as you read through chapter 18. Why did I say that? Because it is repeatedly mentioned as a great city with a flourishing trade and commerce. So there is no way you can interpret Babylon in chapter 18 as metaphorical. It is impossible to do that. While Revelation chapter 18 focuses on commercial Babylon, it also mentions the spiritual aspects of it. And the fact of the matter is that they are enmeshed in some way. They intersect at certain points. Look at how the chapter started. Okay, look at how the chapter started. Revelation 18 verse 2. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a horn for every unclean spirit, a horn for every unclean bird, a horn for every unclean and detestable beast." Immediately after declaring that Babylon is fallen, the angel pointed that Babylon the Great was a dwelling place for fallen angels, for demons, and for everything that is unclean. Why? We shouldn't be surprised, all right? We shouldn't be surprised by it at all. Nimrod and his fellow rebel constructed the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babylon, to reach into the heavens. For what purpose? Is to reach out to the gods. Is to reach out to the fallen angels. And I've said that repeatedly, that Babylon was the place of origin for all false religious systems and the occult. And if you remember, it was at Euphrates River. Okay, Euphrates River is located in Babylon. It was at Euphrates River where the 4 fallen angels and another 200 million fallen angels will be released in the 6th and the final trumpet, when the final sixth and the final trumpet, or rather the sixth trumpet was sounded, okay, 200 million were released to kill 1/3 of the inhabitants of the world. And immediately after verse 2, of course, we come to verse 3. We read this: "For all nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of a luxurious living." The indictment of kings and peoples and nations committing sexual immorality with Mystery Babylon was mentioned again and again, right? Actually twice, okay? Twice before. One time in chapter 14 and another time in chapter 16. And it is mentioned, if you realize, whenever Mystery Babylon is mentioned. The Apostle John will also mention about sexual immorality, that the kings of the world or the peoples of the world will commit sexual immorality with Mystery Babylon. Now, this is a consistent feature of Mystery Babylon. And here in verse 3 of Revelation 18, another category of people is included. Which category is it? The merchants. Okay? The merchants. These are the merchants. These are the business people. These are the traders. These are the corporate executives. These are the CEOs of companies and so on. Everyone that is involved in the business, in commerce, and in trade. And as I say in my previous sermon, committing sexual immorality with Mystery Babylon is a metaphor of illicit and corrupt dealings with her. It is a metaphor. Okay, how does the kings and the masses commit sexual immorality with the entity of Mystery Babylon? Okay, very clearly it is figurative. It is a metaphor of illicit and corrupt dealings with this entity of Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon, remember, is the great prostitute. And the idea behind prostitution is the exchange of services with favor, with money and power. And what I want you, after saying all this, what I want you to really take note is the flow, okay, the connection between verse 2 and verse 3. There is a connective tissue there between these two verses. There is a connection between the spiritual aspect of Mystery Babylon and the financial and the commercial economic aspect of it. Let me say that again. There is a connection between the spiritual aspect of Mystery Babylon and the commercial aspect of it. The fact of the matter is that all three aspects of Mystery Babylon are connected. The political, the religious, and the commercial aspects overlap with one another at certain points, at some points. We shouldn't be surprised. In Revelation chapter 13, you observe that the financial mark of the beast has something to do with the worship of the Antichrist. Right? The false prophet is the protagonist to enforce the Antichrist worship. The false prophet is also the key figure in enforcing the 666 mark of the beast. Read Revelation chapter 13 very carefully. The false prophet is involved not just in pushing the people of the world to worship the Antichrist. He's also involved and is a primary figure involved to push the 666 mark of the beast on people. Okay, the religious element is mixed with the financial element. And as you should know by now, the 666 mark of the beast is a global financial banking and trade system. It is a satanically inspired system for the Antichrist to control and dominate the nations and the peoples of the world. Now, talking about the worship of the Antichrist, I want to make a short digression here to talk about religious or spiritual Babylon. The world is quickly moving towards the formation of a one-world religion. The ultimate goal of religious Babylon is to unite the religions of the world under one banner. Once every 3 years, representatives of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, Shintoism, and all the other religions in the world would gather at the Congress of World and Traditional Religions to discuss ways for peaceful coexistence among all these religions. The venue is the Pyramid of Peace in a place called Astana in Kazakhstan. Okay, for those of you that do not know, Kazakhstan is a big country near to China in the Central Asian region. So this pyramid of peace is a 60-meter glass pyramid dedicated to the unification of the world's religions. And the architecture, okay, it is understood by a lot of people, the architecture reflects ancient Babylon sun worship. Okay, and if you go back to Nimrod really, the symbol for Nimrod is the sun worship. And the symbol for Semiramis, the wife, is the moon. Okay, it relates to the moon goddess worship. Astana is described as, I quote, a futuristic occult capital of the world, embracing the new world order. And a CNN comment says that it is the world's weirdest capital city. Now, earlier this year on March, the Abrahamic House of Worship was opened in Abu Dhabi, the capital city of the United Arab Emirates. It houses a mosque, a church, and a synagogue. Now, the building of the Abrahamic family house is an attempt to bring the three monotheistic religions with roots in the patriarch Abraham together. Okay? And together, Christians, Muslims, and religious Jews make up more than half of the entire world's population. So, this endeavor is a giant step towards uniting the religions of the world. And you think about it, Hinduism, there are many Hindus in the world. For the Hindus to come into this conversation and be part of this whole idea of unification is not a problem. Okay, you can understand why. Because there are many gods in Hinduism, and there is no problem in accepting all these other gods. So very, very quickly, we are seeing the formation of a global religion, of a one world mystery Babylon religion. Now, who won't applaud the efforts to achieve religious harmony, peace, and unity? Whether it's politician or whether it's average people, everybody likes the idea. Okay, as you know, in history, there are many wars that are started for religious purposes and so on. So people will welcome that. But understand one thing, this is not about religious harmony and tolerance while maintaining each religion's unique characteristics. This is a push towards the idea that all religions and all spiritual paths lead to the one and same God. And this flies in the face of Christianity and Jesus' claim of being the only way to salvation. Okay, Jesus said himself in John 14:6, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So, Christians will face increasing pressure in the days ahead to drop Christianity and Jesus' claim of being the only way and the only truth. Do that, or you'll be branded as intolerant. Do that, or you will face opposition and even persecution. So I believe that the momentum will continue to build up for the formation of a one-world religion. the unification of the world's religion will come sooner rather than later. The merger may come with new features and new beliefs like environmentalism and climate change. I suspect that all these will become integrated in the new faith statements of the one world religion. It can attract a lot of people. Okay, I'm sure you come across this idea of Mother Nature worship. As a Christian, I don't use the phrase Mother Nature. It is God that creates, that has created nature and everything that exists. There is no such a thing as Mother Nature. Okay, it got to do with the fact that there are other gods that created this thing, or is an evolutionary process. It is not. It is Father God that has created the world and everything in existence. The false prophet mentioned in Revelation chapter 13 will lead and helm this new mystery Babylon one world religion. Now, this one world religion will be a powerful unifying force during the tribulation when the world is plunged into unprecedented troubles. People always run to religion during times of crisis. The Antichrist will work closely with the false prophet, using religion to consolidate his power over nations and peoples. But things will take a sudden turn when the Antichrist suffers a serious head injury and he dies, and Satan resurrects him. We read in Revelation chapter 13 that the world will marvel. The world will marvel at this stunning resurrection miracle. And as you can imagine, the popularity of the Antichrist will shoot through the roof. The Antichrist will take advantage of this development to proclaim himself as God and as the Savior of the world, as the new Savior of the world. Jesus is passé. Look at what's happening in the world right now. Jesus can't save you. Look at all the destruction. Look at all the catastrophe. Look at all the misery. Jesus is not going to save you. The Antichrist will brand himself as a new Savior. They will come to stop all these catastrophes as the one that will lead the people out from all these things into a brand new world. That's what the Antichrist will do. With the help of the false prophet, who is his close ally, the Antichrist will, at this point, do away with the one world, with the mystery Babylon one world religion, and convert the people to worship him. It becomes easier at this point. People at that time are no longer worshiping different gods, no longer subscribing to different religions, but they are all under one roof, one banner. And then, because of their stunning miracles, Antichrist basically will convert these people, to worship him as God and as the new Savior. And I think most people will do it willingly. Those who refuse will be forced to do so. They will be coerced to do so. The false prophet will enforce the Antichrist worship by linking it to the financial mark, the 666 mark of the beast. To make it more compelling, he will link the worship of the Antichrist to the 666 mark of the beast. Now, without the mark, nobody can buy and sell. And the mark will not only be used for financial transaction, but it will be a symbol of loyalty to the Antichrist. Next, and this is really the final segment, but it's a slightly long segment. I want to look at the judgment of commercial Babylon. I want to look at the judgment of commercial Babylon. Why does God judge and destroy commercial or economic Babylon? What are her sins? What are her crimes? Now, today's passage lists several Mystery Babylon's sins. First is the sin of pride. Then you have the practice of sorcery to mislead the nations. Finally, there is the guilt of there is her guilt of shedding the blood of the saints, the apostles, and the prophets. However, a lot of people don't realize this. However, there is one big sin. There is one big sin that is repeatedly mentioned every time the term Mystery Babylon is mentioned. What sin is that? The wine of the passion of a sexual immorality. The wine of the passion of a sexual immorality with kings, merchants, and nations. This is a metaphor of unrighteous and unjust dealings. This is a metaphor of a corrupt and illicit dealings. This is a metaphor of many conspiracies and manipulations behind the scenes in pursuit of her evil goals. Since Revelation chapter 18 is about the judgment of economic Babylon, I will focus on Mystery Babylon's corruption in matters relating to finance and commerce for the rest of my sermon. Okay? I want us to read verses 4 to 6 again. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she makes." Mystery Babylon's sins and iniquities are piled up as high as heaven. It is time for God to make a drink of the fury of his wrath. That's what the Apostle John say in chapter 16, right? During the seventh and the final bowl judgment. Now another angel appear and is proclaiming that it is time to judge Mystery Babylon. Pay her back. Repay her double. Mystery Babylon's sins and iniquities in the area of finance and commerce are not obvious to most people, including Christians, the people of God. Her misdeeds are covered up in many layers in a very sophisticated way. And today I'm going to talk about this, okay? It's sort of an expose which some of you know, but I want to let this become general knowledge for the people of God in this church. In Revelation chapter 18, God is judging commercial Babylon. God is judging economic Babylon. He's judging the global financial, banking, and trade system by destroying it, by utterly destroying it. Why? Because in his eyes, in God's eyes, it is sinful, it is iniquitous, it has committed sins and iniquity. Okay, think about it. An entity, Mystery Babylon, committing sins and iniquity. There are evil things that Mystery Babylon has done, and God doesn't like it at all, and therefore God judges. Now, let me explain to you why Mystery Babylon is corrupt and evil. Why Mystery Babylon is sinful and iniquitous. In a nutshell, okay, I give it to you in a nutshell first. In a nutshell, there is a lot of manipulation and control behind the scenes to enrich only a few at the expense of the masses. This handful ultra-rich and very powerful people are exerting disproportionate control over the global economic system. Let me say that again. This handful of ultra-rich and extremely powerful people are exerting a disproportionate control over the global economic system. A 2014 Oxfam report titled "Working for the Few" found wealthy elites have co-opted political power to rig the rules of the economic game, undermining democracy. The report also noted growing public awareness of this power grab. That means more and more people are realizing it. Okay, if you do not realize it, you are still sleeping. This report came out many years ago, about 8 to 9 years ago. It also found that increasing inequality is helping the rich undermine democratic processes and drive government policies that promote their interests at the expense of everyone else's. Okay, I'm primarily talking about the West. Okay, that's what I'm interested in because that's where the Antichrist will rise. And in my opinion, the United States of America is Mystery Babylon. So this is referring primarily in the Western Hemisphere. Now let me quote to you a report in Forbes magazine, which is also reported in other major media in the year 2011. I'm going to read that. Can we put it up? Three systems theories at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich have taken a database listing 37 million companies and investors worldwide and analyzed all 43,060 transnational corporations and share ownerships linking them. They built a model of who owns what and what their revenues are and mapped the entire edifice of economic power. They discovered that global corporate control has a distinct bow tie shape with a dominant core of only 147 firms radiating out from the middle. Each of these 147 own interlocking stakes of one another, and together they control 40% of the wealth in the network. A total of 737 companies control 80% of the corporate wealth. This is Forbes magazine, mainstream media. This is the Swiss Institute of Technology, mainstream institute. All right? Okay, there's the last part. This is Say, the paper's authors, the first map of the structure of global corporate control. Can you imagine that only 147 companies, these are transnational companies, and they have interlocking shareholdings. That means I own you, you own me, we got shareholdings in one another's structure. Only 147 companies control 40%, not of the global wealth, but of the global corporate wealth. And 737 companies control 80% of this global corporate wealth. And listen to this. And these companies, these transnational corporations, are owned by only a small handful of wealthy individuals and families. This is not speculative. This is from a research institute from Switzerland, and it is reported in Forbes magazine, a mainstream magazine. If this does not convince you that the super elites in the world are capable of controlling and manipulating the world of commerce, which they do, nothing will convince you. You would think that, these are conspiracy theories. The big media companies are in their hands. The big pharmaceutical companies are in their hands. The big food companies are in their hands. The big military equipment manufacturing companies are in their hands. The big banks and financial institutions are in their hands. The big technology companies are in their hands. The list goes on. It means that they control the news and information. It means that they control medicine and public health. It means that they control food supply around the world. It means that they have a big influence over wars and whether wars will be fought and how long a war will be fought. It means that they control how technologies are deployed and they control money. The most important is they control money, and by extension, they control politics, they control who gets elected, and consequently they control government policies. And government policies in the EU and in the United States of America affects the entire world because they have a big influence over the global institutions. And in other words, these elites control the mainstream narrative in the various arenas. They control the mainstream narrative. They control how the masses like you and I think. They control the idea of what is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. You can see how the ultra-rich, the handful of ultra-rich, can weaponize media, medicine, technology, politics, and business in pursuit of their selfish goals. Let me give you a recent example. Okay, I give you a recent example of how a small group of elites are controlling big companies to further their sinister agenda of world domination. American online and in-store Target lost $9 billion in the week following calls for boycott after its stores display LGBTQ clothing for kids, for children. And then, Bud Light is America's top beer company. It suffered customer pushback and boycott after it launched a marketing campaign involving the transgender activist Dylan Mulvaney, and as a result, its parent company, Anheuser-Busch, lost $27 billion in market value. Why should these two companies go against conventional wisdom to offend their customer base, and as a result of that, suffer such dire consequences? Surely, they must have done their market research first before embarking on such a foolhardy marketing campaign. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Okay, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Most people would think that this company's CEO are probably decided to do what they did because they are woke. They believe in all these agendas, and therefore they wanted to promote the LGBTQ and transgender agendas. Or maybe they are afraid that the LGBTQ activists and succumb to their threats, succumb to their pressure. The truth is more sinister than you think. Those are superficial explanations. I will tell you what the truth really is. It has to do with the ESG scores. It has to do with the ESG scores. The CEO of these big companies are afraid that if they don't comply with these ESG standards, their companies will not be able to raise capital from the big financial institutions and asset managers such as BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Every company needs capital to operate, especially the big companies. And here I want to talk about like the big S&P 500 companies. These are publicly listed companies in the US. They need capital. So if you go along with the ESG score, you get capital. If you decide you don't want to go along, you don't get capital. It is as simple as that. It is all about money. It is control via money. Okay, what is ESG? ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. An ESG score measures a company's commitment to environmental, social, and governance standards. Put it in another way, it measures how well a company addresses risks with respect to environmental, social, and governance issues in its daily operations. These risks involve matters such as carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, board diversities, inclusivities, all these things, a lot of these things got to do with climate change, a lot of these things got to do with the LGBTQ agenda and so on. These are absolute nonsense because they got nothing to do with a commercial companies or corporations' bottom line or profitability at all. But they're integrating all these things into the way companies are being run. And we are not talking about kucing kurat, small companies. We're talking about big companies. The Dow Jones 30 companies, the S&P 500 companies. We're talking about big companies. They have a big influence over their consumer base and so on. Now, I mentioned 3 asset managers just now, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. I want you to know that these are very, very powerful companies. They have a lot of powers that even national governments are afraid of them. Okay, this is the reason why. These are the reasons why. The 3 asset managers collectively manages more than $20 trillion. And that is more than the United States of America's GDP. One of either BlackRock, Vanguard, or State Street is the largest shareholder in 88% of S&P 500 companies. And they are also the 3 largest owner or shareholders of most of the Dow Jones 30 companies. These are 30 very big companies. And they collectively hold a median stake of 21.9% in S&P 500 companies, which represent 24.9% of the votes cast during their AGMs, during these companies' annual general meeting. Think about that. Let that sink into your head. And imagine how much power, how much influence this whole ESG idea, ESG standard is, and how, or rather, these asset managers are. This is the problem, okay? I tell you, this is the problem. They are the champions of the ESG standards. These big asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard are the champions of the ESG metrics or system. No wonder the CEOs of Bud Light and Target are so afraid, and many other S&P companies are so afraid, so compliant of the ESG requirement. They are merely reporting to their bosses. They're the controlling stakeholders. They are merely reporting to their bosses. So don't just think that they are caving into the LGBT activists. Don't just think that these people are woke. There is something more sinister behind. In the world of finance, in the world of banking, in the world of investment, in the world of commerce. And it is through this layer of control that these big companies are doing and banks are doing all this nonsense. Now, let me make some important linkages now. Not many people know where the ESG system originated. You want to make a guess? Where does the ESG system originated? The United Nations, the UN, the United Nations. In 2006, the United Nations enacted the Principles for Responsible Investment. Let's call it PRI. Okay? In 2006, the United Nations enacted the Principles for Responsible Investment, PRI. The PRI is a set of 6 principles outlining how investors can integrate the ESG metrics into their investment decisions. These principles are rules and guidelines not just to promote the ESG standard, but they are used to coerce company to implement and run according to the ESG agenda. The PRI has been signed, okay, listen to this. The PRI has been signed by 3,000 institutional investors representing 40 trillion US dollars in assets under management. Just think of the power that the United Nations has over these big institutions and asset managers, and by extension, the large companies. The next question is, who controls the UN? Who controls the United Nations? And the answer is simply the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs. These NGOs have a great amount of influence over the United Nations agenda through lobbying, advocacy, and partnerships. The NGO that lobbies the United Nations to enact the PRI is the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative. Okay, long words. The acronym is also very long. UNEPFI. And the UNEPFI is a partnership between the UN Environment Programme and the financial institutions. And the big financial institutions. And you know which financial institutions are pushing for the ESG metrics? People like BlackRock, people like Vanguard, people like State Street. So can you see the layers? Can you see the way they intersect? Can you see the way they interface? Can you see one is on another? They are all mixed up all together until you don't see, you don't understand what this whole thing is all about. The next question is, who controls the NGOs that control United Nations? Who control the NGOs? A few groups control the NGOs through donations and grants. The first group is the national governments. And these national governments are primarily from Western Europe, and of course the US as well. The second group is the financial institutions, the big asset management firms, the big banks and so on. The third group is the foundations. The third group is the foundations. Okay, you know what foundations are? If you are very rich, very wealthy, you got generations of wealth, a lot of money, and you want to manage that money properly, you create foundations so that the money is parked there. Foundations do a lot of philanthropic work, do a lot of activities and all that, but they can be used for a lot of other purposes. Only the rich understand. Average people like us, we may understand a few things here and there, but we are clueless as to a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. So the third group is the foundations. Many people have become increasingly aware of how certain foundations, such as the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, and George Soros Open Society Foundation, are controlling the mainstream narrative in areas such as culture, public health, by that I mean also medicine, and politics. According to its own website, Open Society Foundation has given a few hundreds of millions of dollars to the Human Rights Campaign, HRC. It's a subsidiary, all right, over the past 10 years. And you wonder what human rights campaigns are they getting into? What human rights issues are they interested? I'm referring to HRC, right? What are they supporting? Here are a few examples. Legal challenges to anti-LGBTQ laws. Legal challenges to anti-LGBTQ laws. Public campaigns about LGBTQ issues. Lobbying effort for LGBTQ rights legislation. You get the idea. You get the idea. We wear white. We push back against all this LGBT activism and so on. But who's supporting the other side? The foundations, the big boys with huge amount of money and a lot of wealth. It's a war of David against Goliath. This is how things work. The final question is this: who controls these foundations? Who controls the foundations that controls the NGO that control United Nations, that comes out with the ESG standard? The answer is simple and straightforward. These are the super wealthy elites and super wealthy families. Connect what I say here to what I said earlier about a few companies controlling a staggering percentage and massive amounts of corporate wealth. And you'll begin to understand how these people, how these super rich elites control the world and the mainstream narrative in various areas. These are not conspiracy theories, rather, these are real conspiracies at the very highest level. This is Mystery Babylon. This is how economic Babylon works. This is how commercial Babylon works. I will tell you that these financial oligarchs, and we can put it up, these financial oligarchs have a sinister agenda to control the world through finance and commerce. They work through layers of covers. They conspire behind the scene. I've come to the end of today's sermon, more next week. In Revelation chapter 18, we see God judging commercial Babylon for her sins and iniquities. The divine judgment will be sudden, swift, and final. It will be devastating. In a single hour, in a single day, God will destroy commercial Babylon, and she will be no more. Both the country and the global financial, banking, and trade system. Fallen is Babylon the Great. And then a voice, John heard a voice calling out, "Come out of her. Come out of her, my people." I will look at what that means and the details of the judgments in my next sermon next week. Until then, shall we all stand to worship the Lord?